All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 392. No brakes on the female gripe train. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks, the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson.
Hello.
Richard the Lionhearted, and the Doge in charge, Bram Martinez. Hello to all of you, and hopefully everybody's not losing their minds right now with all the shit that's going on. But we're not going to talk about all the shit that's going on. We're just going to talk about this incel article for now. I promise you, I'm not avoiding Iran. I'm watching to see what's going to happen. I already said my piece about it 2 days ago in HBR News. And now it's kind of a wait and see what's going to happen next, because the legal maneuverings and the changes that are going to be taking place there.
At some point, we'll find out. At some point, we'll find out that yes, women are now allowed to dress as whores, but there is still some stuff happening to Iranian men.
I really hope that's not the only reason why we. I know that's not the only reason why we went in there, but in any case, there are right now the pot is brewing, and it's too soon to taste it. We'll just leave it at that. The stew is brewing and it's too soon to taste it. So with that out of the way, we'll get into what we actually are getting into today. I don't know if I actually mentioned the Doge in charge now, because it's been a minute since then, and I can't remember what I said. So,
everyone knows the Mexican is in charge. We like to
Puerto
tell
Rican.
ourselves. We like to tell ourselves that Allison is in charge, but it's clearly the Mexican. I know he's not a Mexican. I call him
just
Mexican
because Karen calls him a shipwrecked Mexican. I think that's the term. Oh my gosh. But I still need him to do the things that I have yet to actually even study how to do. And I promise you, I'm not being a lazy shit. I am working 80 hours a week. So I don't have time to sit and read. Every so often I have time to tweet something that I don't have to do a lot of research in order to tweet it. And aside from that, you guys probably haven't heard from me very much. Sorry about that. But things are changing, and hopefully in the next few months, I will not be working 80 hours a week. So, there we go.
That sounds like a good change.
I hope so. I hope so. Although I will say, the money from the overtime is really nice.
Yeah,
that is a benefit, and we have had to use it on a number of things. For instance, when you purchase a diesel truck that was made 30 years ago, it does have some idiosyncrasies. And also, I'm pretty sure it doesn't like the gas from a certain grocery store chain that I believe started in the Dayton metro area. And so now we are spending more money on it. But that is as it is. In the meantime, we are going to get started. We are going over some true, absolute code of the cult of the bee of the itching. Itchy bees everywhere in this article. But before we get into that, we got to do what we got to do, which we got to do every single time, just in case somebody hasn't heard it. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find a link to find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, last week, we started talking, we started with this article or this paragraph about MGTOW. And I find it's one of the things I find interesting about this before we actually start reading again is how defensive and how aggressive in some ways women in general, not just feminists, but women in general get toward the idea of men simply not pursuing closeness with women of any kind, the men not trusting women, men not making their lives all about women. Like as soon as a man, like they'll tell us they want men to leave women alone, stop bothering women, stop being pests toward women, and if you show an interest in women, that makes you a sex pest, right? You're accused of that. But then at the same time, if you don't, and you tell people that you don't in any way, shape, or form, you post it in a MGTOW forum, you call yourself a MGTOW, man going his own way, men going their own way. If you say anything to that degree at all, then all of a sudden you're hateful and dangerous and scary, and you need to be corralled. Such as Laura Bates said in her book, Men Who Hate Women, because of course, not doing exactly what women say, doing exactly what women have asked, is hateful toward women.
Yeah, this is the important difference between an incel and a MGTOW. A feminist will never accuse an incel of being a MGTOW, but they will accuse every MGTOW of being an incel. Now, I'm sure some of you can already figure out why that is and what that means, but it's important to explain to those who don't understand. An incel is a derogatory term invented by feminists, and yes, it was invented by feminists. It's unfortunate that so many men have adopted that term, but it was invented by feminists around the time of Elliot Rodger, and I hope I don't get this whole stream taken down by just mentioning his name. But ever since that happened,
it was invented. It was invented before that, so in the 90s.
But so, it wasn't it wasn't invented by the men who are tarred with that phrase. It was invented by.
It was called.
Go on.
It was called infill. Then it got turned into incel in the late 90s, early thousands. So the word evolved over time.
And yeah, the whole idea is go on.
So the whole concept of it, so a woman came up with the word infill after she wanted to find a partner. She then abandoned the group infill because she found a partner, and then the word got turned into what it got turned to by feminist.
Yeah, it's an incel is an incel is a man who worships women, but is tragically unable to touch them. That's basically what it means. And a MGTOW is a man who does not worship women and has no interest in touching them. He has found other things in life. He has found things in life higher than touching a woman. And feminists can't stand this. Women, entrenched in the modern feminist paradigm, cannot stand this. They cannot even countenance the idea of a man who is simply not interested in women because they can find higher things to do. And this is not a modern phenomenon, by the way. The Wright brothers were MGTOWs. Nikola Tesla was a MGTOW. All manner of men who changed the future for the better. The men who advanced human flourishment throughout history were technically MGTOWs because they weren't interested in finding wives. They were not interested in chasing skirt or whatever it was.
There's good reason for that too. There are two ways only that involvement with a woman can go for a man who has any kind of goals that anyone else might call lofty until he achieves them, and then suddenly he's brilliant. And one way is she can be a supportive wife, a person who does everything that she can to fulfill any request that he makes of her for assistance or support, even if it's just keep my house while I do this thing that everyone else says is crazy, but if I succeed, it's going to launch humanity forward in this area that I'm working in for through hundreds of years. And that's one way, right? The other way is by being unsupportive, she can hold him back. I think a lot of men that have achieved greatness while simultaneously avoiding contact with women, or at least declining to become intimate partners with a woman, feared that second path with good reason. Many women prefer to take that second path because they are narcissistic and they won't be supportive of him because it's not she won't see that it's in her interest. The ride or die woman who will go through poverty and ridicule in the hopes that the thing her man is working on pans out, and the trust that he knows what he's doing and he's right, that's a rare woman. So it's entirely fair for men who are chasing greatness in some way or another, whether it's for their own sake or for humanity's sake. It's entirely fair for them to say, without a woman, I'm going to do this without a woman.
And yeah,
I know there was more, Mike.
I mean, I think I basically got there. Feminists dream of an entire populace of men who worship women, but are unable to get them. They want to believe that the entire male populace is incels. That they desperately want to receive the holy touch of women, but they cannot until they do everything that women want them to do. And that's why Ross Kemp, many of you outside the UK will not know who Ross Kemp is, but Ross Kemp did a documentary. I think it's still in the stages of editing that documentary about incels, because it's considered such an emergency to examine.
No, it came out Monday, so it's on crime scene investigation. Yeah, it came out Monday. It's on the crime scene investigation channel in the UK.
Of course.
Well, and Ross Kemp has come to a realization. You may have seen the clip that's been going around on Twitter where he was interviewing this guy, and he asked him how many incel killers have existed in the world, and it was like it's between 5 and 12 or whatever it is. Like, it's negligibly tiny. Hardly anyone has committed any mass murders along these supposedly ideological lines. And I'm still like, even Elliot Rodger didn't really do it over the ideological lines of this incel phenomenon.
He hated incels. They labeled him an MRA at first.
Yes.
Yeah, they did. They tried everything. They labeled him an MRA, a PUA. He hated PUAs too, and
he killed more, and he killed more men than women. He killed
more. He killed more Asian men.
Yeah, he lured several of his student friends to his student residence and then stabbed them to death. And only then did he go out and shoot up a sorority, and in which he ended up killing, I think, 3 women and 1 man. He killed more men than women, and yet to this day, the Wikipedia article on him will call him a femicidal something or other. Like he did this because he wanted to kill women, and yet somehow he killed more men than women. And this is a consistent theme, that even when men ostensibly hate women, they will still kill more men than women. And yeah, that's war in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah. So not to get into a long discussion about this, but femicide isn't a real term,
No,
by the way.
not at all.
Feminists made it up for a specific reason.
They made up incel,
and we should know, and we shouldn't use it for any reason. And in fact, we should call them out on it every time they use it, because the specific reason they made it up, homicide, it refers to a Homo sapien, the killing of a Homo sapien. A Homo sapien is not just a man; it's a man or a woman or a child. It's somebody who is 9 months old or 99 years old. Somebody who is 9 minutes old is Homo sapien. And the only people that our laws do not count under the term homicide are those that have not yet been born, right? And that might change. They made up a term for when a murder victim is an infant. So after you've been born, like 9 seconds after you've been born, if you're murdered, if homicide is committed against you, they will call it infanticide in some places, because it is considered to be a worse crime to murder a helpless infant than an individual who might be able to fight back. And it's fair to say that it is particularly brutal and callous and heinous to look at a cute little baby, a cute little infant, and decide, I need to kill that. But at the same time, a human life is a human life, and taking a human life is always a horrible thing to do. And there should be very limited circumstances under which we do not consider the person a horrible, evil person for doing it. And unfortunately, what feminists have done there is attempt to make it seem like it is more evil and more deserving of repercussions, and the victim is more deserving of justice if that individual is female. Or in other words, if a man is a homicide victim, feminists don't think that homicide victim deserves the same sympathy and compassion and outrage that we would exhibit if the victim was a woman. And in my opinion, we should be calling that out every single time we see that term, because it is not just sexist, it is gendercidal. In other words, feminists are arguing that it's okay to kill men. It's okay to kill as long as the person you're killing is not a woman. And that's bullshit. We should be trying to minimize violence. in our modern society. Our civilization hasn't grown up yet. And instead, feminists are arguing over when it's okay. We should not be arguing over when it's okay. We should be arguing that it's not.
Incidentally, the word androcide is not in common parlance. And
Nor should it be.
Well, if it was, we would find ourselves describing almost every war as an androcide, and that includes the most recent one, the fucking Iranian war. 6 Americans have been killed, and they're all men, unsurprisingly.
All the leaders that were targeted were men because under their regime, only men could be in leadership positions.
Like, no one goes into a war deciding to kill mainly women.
Yep.
They literally always go into a war deciding to kill mostly men. I mean, it's written in all of our religious texts.
Right.
And
but the point I'm making here is that arguing, what's worse, killing a male or female human being, is wrong. It's evil to kill, right? It is evil to kill, and the only times that it is not intentionally evil is when it's an accident that you couldn't foresee and take measures to avoid, or when you're defending against an attempt at killing you. That's it. Like, I don't even like the concept of mercy killings. It's hard to justify that. But I mean, I know some people do. But the point is that is overt misandry. That the word femicide is overt misandry, and it is gendercidal against men. And it exists only to justify treating male victims of homicide, any type of homicide, as less deserving of compassion and justice than female victims. We should not be allowing that. We wouldn't allow it if we started using the term androcide, homicide and androcide. Well, it's worse when you kill a man. There might even be arguments on each side for why it's worse when you kill one sex or the other. There might even be people that'll come up with justifications why they think it's worse. They're all bullshit. Every justification you can come up with is bullshit. Every human life is valuable. Every single one. And we should be avoiding distinctions like, well, this person that was killed was female, therefore it's a big deal. Or this person that was killed was insert utilitarian reason for why we think a man might be valuable here. And therefore it's a bigger deal than, say, if an incel was sacrificed. Right? That they're all human, they're all valuable, and it is all important to put a stop to. It is all a big deal. Every human death before that person's time is a loss and a tragedy, even when we've had to execute a human being for committing a heinous crime, because we lost that person the moment they went down that path and nobody stepped up to help them get back on a better path, or anybody that tried failed. Right? Every human death before their time is a tragedy, is a failure on the part of humanity. And the thing we should be striving for is to get to a point where we forget all of the words for homicide, because one hasn't happened in so long we haven't had to talk about it. That's what we should be trying to do, not arguing over who's more important to preserve. But regarding the MGTOW thing, what I wanted to point out in bringing that up is similar, right? To bring this back full circle. Feminists are very offended that there are men who do not make women the most important thing in their lives, who don't pursue women as their main reason for existing, to get married and start a family, who don't make mentoring women their primary function at work, who don't interact with women any more than they have to. Um, Feminists get very offended. Women in general get offended about this, right? They get very upset. So imagine for a minute if something like 80% of the world male population decided that 50% of the world female population was beneath their notice and shouldn't even draw their attention for fear of being castigated for having the audacity to do so. Imagine exactly how offended women would be if half of the female population was unable to find a partner because 80% of the male population was arguing over the supermodels of the female population and the best actresses and musicians and the most popular women in the world, right? The thing that makes women consider themselves alphas, the queen bees of the world, and the wealthiest women in the world. You think that the cries of misogyny would drown out all other sounds upon the earth? Because I do. But
Or they call you a PDF.
yeah, they would call you that. The PDF, the dreaded PDF file. Depending on, like, especially if men were all searching for women in their 20s, which is funny because when women do it, they call it romance tourism, right? And women my age who are grandmothers and working as in middle management in some stupid company somewhere, they will go to foreign nations and exploit the prostitution system there for men of military age, of like entry age into the military, men who haven't
A
been
lot,
adults for very long, or men, younger men, like they would consider men, but teenagers that
yeah,
here would still be underage.
a lot of people in the UK go to like the Caribbean and like
Hmm.
other places to do that. Before the dementia hit, yeah, mom used to do that a lot before the dementia hit. So because she went back and forth to Jamaica to see someone before the dementia hit.
A lot of women do that. They'll go to nations that are maybe at the higher end of third world, or in this nations that can be considered second world. They'll go to nations that are at the lower end of first world in terms of economics, or nations that depend heavily on tourism for like their staying afloat, and on assistance from other countries when there's a disaster, because they never have enough to cover it themselves. And they'll go and they will target there. We've featured articles about this in the past on HBR Talk. In fact, they'll target underage guys. They'll target guys that are like 14, 15, 16. In the United States, I think the lowest age of consent in any state in the United States is 16. And that's the age, it's traditionally, it's the age when you used to be able to get your driver's license. And you used to be, when I was in school, you'd take driver's ed, you take a driver's test until you passed. And there were limitations on how often you could take it. And that would make you take time to study and practice if you were unable to pass the driver's test the first time around. But in any case, and then it was pretty common, by the way. Like I took calculus and I did fine in calculus, but the spatial relations part of the driver's test, I thought I could practice in one car and then take the test in a different one, and it didn't work. So I failed that the first time around. I hit the cones. But in any case, you could get that. You could do that at the age of 16, and then drive without an adult in the car. You didn't have to have an adult in the car. Today, you can start learning to drive with an adult in the car, I think at the age of 15, but I think you have to have an adult in the car until the age of 18. I don't know for sure because my daughters lived with their biological mom and their stepfather when they went through all that. My son chose to not drive until he was older because we lived in an area where you could walk everywhere and just get what you wanted by walking to the store and so on. And he didn't see any point in taking the risk. And so, which I thought was a pretty mature decision. And it also saved us a lot on insurance. But in any case, that was the youngest age that I've seen in any state. There was a state for a while, I want to say Kentucky, but I'm not sure, that allowed 15-year-olds to consent. But I think in most states it's 16. I think my battery might be dying in my. That's gonna drive me nuts. I just heard my smoke alarm chirp. So just so you guys know, I
Are
can't
you sure
hear
you're
that.
not? You sure you're not African American?
No, I definitely hear it. I know it. That is the most annoying sound in the world. And just this is totally off topic, but where one time, where I worked, it's the time of year when it does this to me. And the worst part is, it's the type that you have to have somebody come in and change the battery, because if you try to change the battery, it sets off the fire alarm. So I can't do anything about it. I couldn't even pause the show and do anything about it. So if you hear it, if it chirps again, just be aware. I can hear that. I have noise canceling headphones on and I can still hear that. But and I had the same problem at one of the homes I work at, and I work on the night shift. So if it starts in the middle of the night, that you can't call maintenance and have them come in on an emergency and change that. But so you got like 8 hours of that thing going off every 30 seconds. And by the end of the shift, my hair's on the floor. I just cannot stand noises like that. But in any case, it like completely derailed me. That sound. Part of the reason I'm telling you this is because I immediately forgot what I was talking about when I heard that beep. But
You're
it took.
gonna read the article.
Yeah, it is time to get into the article. But and now everybody's wondering why the fuck it took 50 years for the medical community to diagnose me as autistic. That kind of noise, like, just can completely. I completely lose everything. I hate loud beeps and loud whistling, screeching noises, sirens, all that kind of stuff. Which is funny because I actually love ambulances and fire trucks and all. I just don't like the noises they make. So, we were talking about the sex tourism and the age and consent. So in the US, it is perfectly normal for an adult to be considered to have something profoundly wrong with them if they want to be with somebody significantly younger than them that is under the age of 18. Like, if you see a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old together, that's pretty normal, right? But if you see a 39-year-old and a 17-year-old, people are going to point and talk. And in my opinion, they should. 17 isn't very mature in all honesty. But women expect it to be tolerated if you see a 39-year-old and a 21-year-old, where the 39-year-old is female and 21-year-old is male. On the other hand, they will call you a pedo. Yeah, unless it's their son, right? They will call you a pedo if you, as a 39-year-old, are with a 30 or 21-year-old woman. And that's really, it's not just sexist. It's it's very hateful. Either we're adults when we're adults, or not. And that, to that end, I would say it shouldn't matter male or female. Anybody that is looking for somebody that's a teenager when they're that old has some questions to answer. And it's not because necessarily it should always be considered predatory, but if that individual isn't predatory, they're profoundly immature and should be not trusted for that reason. Right? Personally, when I was that age, I'm trying to think, 39 was a little bit ago. I really didn't even like the idea of going below 30. Like I had to have somebody convince me that it was safe and okay to talk, even just about stuff, not like actually having a romantic relationship, because by that time that wasn't an interest. But yeah, it's just like, at 25, you're old enough for me to be blunt in talking about the risks of dealing with this circumstance you're in. But you still look like a kid to me. And now my youngest is older than that. So now, like, if you're under 30, you really do look like a kid to me. My youngest isn't over 30, but he's the same age I was when I gave birth to him. And my two older kids are over 30. And it's just, it looks very different from this angle than it did when I was that age. And if you get to my age and it doesn't, then you haven't done something in terms of your personal growth that you should have done by this point. That's at the very least, you haven't done something that you should have done by this point. So, but in any case,
you may remember when you were 8 years old, 10-year-olds looked like adults. When you look back on your memory of being in school, like the kids who were 2 years older than you looked like, even the residual memories you have of the kids who were 2 years older than you,
yeah,
they look like adults. The memory you have of them they were basically adults, even though in reality they were basically children. And it makes sense, because when you're a child, like, a year is a 10th of your life.
Yep.
But
Yep.
when you're 50, a year is a 50th of your life, and so it grows like that. The older you get, the less important these age differences are. And
Well, there's other things too. When my generation was 10 years old, it was normal for me to be allowed to babysit my 8-year-old brother for a couple of hours when my parents were out of the house. Dad might be teaching and mom might be at the store, right? And we would know where mom was. We would know where dad was. We had our emergency phone numbers. We knew which neighbors to go call for help if there was a problem. We knew what to do if the house caught fire, right? And how to get out and be safe and everything. We knew what we weren't allowed to touch. My parents could keep a shotgun in the closet that we knew was in there, not under lock and key, and know that we would not touch it. Like, I won't tell the story of the fart in the bedroom, but we went looking for we searched their room one time for something else that doesn't doesn't exist, and found it and didn't touch it because we knew they would kick our asses if we touched it. We knew we weren't allowed to touch that, right? But by the time millennial generation was 10 years old, at least half of that stuff was no longer true. It was either you had to have a gun under lock and key, right? Or you couldn't leave two kids that age. Yeah, that was definitely the fucking I just heard it again. I don't know. It's upstairs, so I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it's gonna drive me nuts. At least it's not everything.
It was overshadowed by a Discord notification noise.
Oh yeah. See, I'm not getting Discord noises because I turn all of those off. I couldn't use Discord if it was making those noises at me all the time. But yeah, millennial 10-year-olds, very few of them ever babysat a younger sibling at that age. It was a few years later when they might be allowed to be home alone for, half an hour with a younger sibling. By the time I was 12, I cooked my first full meal for the whole family at the age of 12. Like I had been learning. I asked mom for a easy bake oven. I don't know if they still make those, but essentially it's cooking with a light bulb. It's literally cooking with a light bulb in a box. And I asked for one, and mom's like, no, you don't need that. We're gonna learn to use the real oven. When I was like 9 or 10 years old, and because one of my friends had one, and by 12, I cooked a pot roast, with potatoes and carrots and broth and all the amenities, and then also some biscuits. So I knew how to make biscuits. Like we had all the different, we had sides, we had a dessert that I made, and everything. And I still remember that because we sat down at the table and started dinner, and Dad complimented Mom on the meal, which he did almost every single time immediately, and did every single time at some point in the meal. But sat down, first bite, complimented it, and Mom's like, "Well, Hannah cooked it." And he said, "Oh, you did a good job on the roast." And she goes, "He cooked the whole meal." Or she cooked the whole meal. And that was one of my proudest moments as a kid, right? But today, with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, a lot of them were not even allowed near the stove or the oven until they were in their teenage years, right? Because it's hot and it can burn you. And so we've gotten well more protective generationally. By the time my mom was 14, she was actually working in a hospital for disabled kids as a cook, and did a lot of other things because it was just starting up at that point. It was a new thing, and I don't think I had a paying job until I was 15, and I didn't work full time until I was 18. So things are very different, right? I did have a paying job. I had a paying job at 11, but I was working for my parents. A lot of the boys in the neighborhood had paper routes at the age of 10. Not very many kids today even can do that because you'd have to have mom or dad drive you around. So it's not just weird because of the age difference. It's also weird because of the generational difference in expectations of personal accountability for one's own safety versus the older generation being protective of the younger generation. And I think that makes a big difference to most mature adults when they're around people that are the age of their younger siblings or their children, right? That you're a little more protective. But regarding this, the point I wanted to make with the original long talk was the fact that women's attitude, if men had the same attitude toward women that women have toward men, that creates the incel phenomenon and the MGTOW phenomenon, women would play victim of that. They would scream from the hills misogyny. They would scream from the hills patriarchy. We'd be hearing that men everywhere, all men hate women, and that women are the most oppressed. And they basically say the same things they say now, but louder, longer, and more screechy, more likely than not.
They wouldn't just complain about it; they'd ban it.
Yeah,
Like I said in my last video, if women had to dress like penguins all the fucking time, they'd scream, "This is the Handmaid's Tale," and turn it into a crime.
Yep. If they had to dress like men, if women had to dress the way men have to dress all the time, as opposed to like women like me wearing cargo pants because pockets, not because I have to wear this for work, so it's a privilege basically that I can dress in some way like a man. I don't have to wear a dress. I don't have the strict limitations that a man has. Women would never put up with that. But when men take measures to protect themselves or join a forum and talk about how hard it is to live with being so isolated or rejected or having a low self-esteem or anything like that, women attack that as well. They're not even allowed to have the same level of complaints that women would have over being in their situation. Before we go on, we got 3 super chows I'm going to read because I don't want them to pile up. And they're already starting to pile up. One of them is from yesterday, and I believe it is a response to the show that was playing yesterday. Zapier gave us $5 and said, the UK? More like the UK. He. Some honey money for the Badgers. I always like a good pun. But there we go. Art Force gave us $50. Thank you, Art Force, and said, HBR Talk $3.92, badgering the honey. And Meredith G gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk $3.92, honey of the Badgers. Why is it that chirps always happen at the most inconvenient times, like 3 a.m. in the morning? Which it's because it's always inconvenient. It is always inconvenient for something to be making an annoying noise. And I know that they make that noise deliberately annoying so that you won't ignore it and fail to protect your house from a fire. But it's still annoying.
To be fair, I am not black, and I went ahead and put up with that shit for like a couple of days once. In my defense, I was constantly fucked up on drugs at the time, and that's why I was able to ignore it.
There we go. There we go. So we had just read that paragraph in the bit about Aristophanes, and so we will go on. Alex goes on to say, besides, a lot of the men weren't in it for the long haul. The real conviction and self-esteem needed to maintain a strike was lacking. Most men view themselves as subhuman as well. A lot of men are self-loathing. And when I read that, the first thing I thought was, well, who taught them to think of themselves that way? Right? And the truth is, it's both gender of parent. What do you start hearing when you've got a sister from the time you're a little kid, and every place you go, everything you do, anytime there's a thing being handed out or a benefit to be had, every guy who grows up, at least in Western society, hears ladies first. Like, sorry, she's 5. She's not old enough to be a lady. Ladies first. Let her go ride in the front seat of the car. Ladies first. Not a 5-year-old, but well, back when I was a kid, we could. But give her the cookie first. Ladies first. There's a fire drill. Ladies first. Like, don't even. But
Yeah,
maybe they're
you have to give up
self-loathing
your
because they're told they're worthless.
you have to give up your chocolate milk first.
Can you
You
say
have
that
to give
again?
up your chocolate milk. You have to give up your chocolate milk first for the lady.
Oh yes, yes. In elementary school, when we used to get milk in the classroom, that was a thing. If they didn't have enough chocolate milk, it was always the boys that were getting asked, "Will you drink white milk today instead?" When it's they're the ones
I
that
always
need
said
the
no.
energy.
I always said no.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. That's fair. And for me as a kid, I noticed that simply because I always thought, well, why aren't they asking me? I'll drink it. It's just milk. Um, I was that kid that my parents had to have enough milk for me to drink about a gallon a day from the time I was a little kid till I moved out, um, to go to college because that was probably my favorite thing in the whole world to drink. I didn't have to put anything in it. It was good as it was. But yeah, the boys were put in that position. And even I've noticed it in daily life at other times, right? Um, last time I was on an airplane where they started asking if anybody would be volunteering to bump to another flight, and they'll give you a credit for a certain amount. And they're looking around to see if anybody will take the money, and they don't have to make somebody get off the plane. And before I realized what they were talking about, she starts looking, and I can see her making eye contact with men on the plane. Like, would you do it? Would you do it? And then before anybody really got a chance to volunteer, like she didn't even wait long enough for people to process, oh, $700 would be nice. I will bump to a later flight, sure. She just started, all right, well, these are the passengers that have to get off if nobody volunteers. And started taking people off, and that was that. So like she took 3 people, and it was about that time that the one of the guys was like, I'll go, but because he wanted the $700. But it was by that time she already had them going, and it was too late. But she really did start looking at the men. Looked right over my head at the guy behind me, in fact, and kind of leaned around, and anybody, as if women can't volunteer for stuff like that. And if I'd have had a minute to think about it, that would have been a good way to get $700. But in any case, they do that, right? If there's a disaster and somebody has to risk their lives to get somebody out of a bad situation, the people that are first sent in, if they haven't volunteered, in which some usually do, are men. And men are so humble about the value of their lives that you can find videos on YouTube of them risking their lives to rescue animals from floodwaters, pets from floodwaters. A guy will risk his life to preserve the life of a dog or a cat that isn't even his pet, right? Guys will risk their lives on the highway where there's traffic all around them, and some animal is pinned up against the median, like the divider, because the traffic is moving too fast and they're afraid to move. And I've seen men risk their lives just to make someone comfortable saving themselves. Where, if I can do it, you can do it. First time I saw a guy be so humble about the value of his life that he risked it, when that was my age, that he risked it over and over again, was a young man in my high school. That there was a fire in his neighborhood, and he rescued like 5 kids from a burning house, where he just went inside the house with the flames all around him over and over again and pulled them all out. And he was lucky; nothing bad happened to him. Like he got sick from smoke inhalation, but not like go to the hospital and be admitted sick. It bothered him for a while, but there were parts of that house that collapsed. So it could have been significantly worse. Like, I don't know how many of you have read or seen The Outsiders, but Tao, one of the main characters, dies. They went in to rescue kids from a burning house, and part of it collapsed on him. So yeah, most men view themselves as, maybe most men don't view themselves as subhuman, but they do view others, they do value others more than they value themselves. At least to the degree that they are humble about the value of their lives and are willing to risk their lives. Even boys are willing to risk their lives to protect other people that they care about. And many of them, that qualifier that they care about goes well beyond the people that they know and includes living things that are not people. So she asks him if his views make him on women make him unhappy. And he says, "It can be hard. Maybe I'm a freak," he sighs. "Maybe it is natural for me to tune this abuse out. I don't know. It gets me fucking angry." And again, questions about this, right? Imagine judging a feminist for being angry about the history that they are told is true. What do you think they would say? Do you think they would be like, "Oh, that's fair. I shouldn't be angry about this. It's not happening to me. And the circumstances were not as my ideology describes." Or do you think she would call you a misogynist?
The second one.
Yeah, I do too. I think, because I've been called a misogynist for that. In Eric Hoffer's The True Believer, he analyzes permanent misfits like Alex, who, because of some personal defect, feel unfulfilled in life. Notice she just called she called him defective. She stated that he has a personal defect, but she hasn't actually described one.
She called him regarded.
Yeah. She did do that. That's true. Whatever they undertake becomes a passionate pursuit, but they never arrive, never pause, Hoffer writes. Instead, they can only find their salvation in the compact collectivity of a mass movement. By renouncing individual will, judgment, and ambition, and dedicating all their powers to the service of an eternal cause, they are at last lifted off the endless treadmill. Alex has more zeal than anyone I've ever met, and he resents anyone with less than a total commitment to his eternal cause. So I know a lot of people that are involved in various causes, from my earliest cause, and I guess you could say my eternal cause, is the pro-life movement. I want to see not just abortion reduced to 0, but also suicide, war, and the death penalty. I want to see human life valued to the degree that we do everything we humanly can to prevent untimely death. But And so one of my first bits of activism was involved with the pro-life movement. Right? But the compact collectivity of a mass movement, renouncing individual will, judgment, and ambition, and dedicating all of their powers to service of an eternal cause, that's bullshit. Right? Being dedicated to an outcome that you have assigned merit. Like I've assigned valuing and preserving human life to have merit as an outcome. I don't think that takes away free will. That is a judgment in and of itself. I've judged humanity's attitude toward human life to be way too blasé. Like we accept untimely death way too easily. And as a result, we have it happen way too often. But that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else is telling me what to think, or that I am not making judgment calls in regard to what is right and wrong, and how it should be approached. Right? For instance, you look at abortion laws, and I look at the history of women's responses to abortion laws. And I don't think that the most effective way to end the practice of using abortion as a means of getting out of pregnancy that doesn't threaten to kill the woman. I don't think the law is the most effective means of changing that until we change the attitudes of women. They'll do the same thing they did before, which is create an underground network, a black market for abortion. They will even risk their lives to abort pregnancies that are progressing in a healthy manner, that are safe. Right? And so obviously the problem isn't the law. The problem is the attitude of women, and that's what needs to be addressed. When people talk about making law the way that they address the problem, I feel like they're going down the wrong path. And that's not having someone else tell me. That's looking at the evidence and assessing it and drawing a conclusion. I don't think that incels are any different. I don't think people are telling them what to think. I think they are looking at the evidence, assessing it, drawing conclusions, and acting on those conclusions. I don't know much about Alex. Alex, of course, is some individual that I've never met. But I would bet you if you sat and talked to him for an hour, you'd find that he's a totally different person than the person that has been presented in this article. She goes on, men who are drawn into hating and avoiding women are often born outsiders. A 2020 study by the Commission for Countering Extremism, I'm assuming that's a UK thing, found that 30% of incels met the clinical requirements for being referred for an autism assignment, suggesting a much higher rate of autism than in the general population. I don't know if she realizes what she just said here. You can imagine that if you're a young man with autism, you're crying out for a rule book about dating, says William Costello, an academic at the University of Texas who specializes in mating psychology. Dating has got to be more difficult since it's moved online, he adds. It's all pressure to do it on your own. But the way that she words this, men who are drawn into hating and avoiding women are often born outsiders. And then she goes on to say that 30% of incels met the clinical requirements for being referred to for an autism assessment. So without understanding or knowing anything about autism, she just assigned all autistic people the classification of being born outsiders. Now, obviously, there are psychological differences, misunderstandings that happen between autistic people and neurotypical people, communication differences, and so on. But that doesn't mean that you're born to be an outsider. Right? Being born different doesn't mean that you have to be an outsider, that other people have to socially reject you. Most of the problems in my inability to socialize with other people were at my end growing up. The rest of my classmates tried their damnedest to include me in things. I just didn't always get it. Most of the time, I didn't get it. And when I thought I got it, I didn't get it. And then there were times where I thought I was being rejected when I wasn't being rejected, right? And I'm very high functioning. I didn't get diagnosed until I was in my 50s. Just a couple of years ago, actually. Last year, actually. So, I went through all of my adolescence, all of my university days, most of my various jobs. No employer, no coworker knew. No accommodations from anyone, right? It shouldn't be the default setting in society that just because a dude is autistic, he gets treated differently. Just because a dude is autistic doesn't mean that people should suddenly exclude him from society. So this born outsider thing, it's really, really ableist. If we can have a social environment in which a person who is high functioning and autistic, that is female, can find more acceptance than she was looking for, we should really be able to do the same thing for boys. We really should be able to do the same thing for men.
FYI, I'm not autistic or ADD. I don't have any medical excuse for being as socially awkward as I am. But I was let's just say rejected in my school days, and I'm pretty sure it was just because I kind of just fucking suck. But it's okay to just kind of just fucking suck if you're a male, but you'll still get the same treatment that the average autistic or ADD person gets, with or without a diagnosis. Because if you're male and you're a bit weird, then you'll get that kind of treatment. DSM or no DSM, even if there's nothing in the DSM that can describe your condition, you might just be a normal male who has no medical excuse for just sucking. Like you'll get that kind of treatment, and maybe you deserve it. Maybe some will say that you deserve it because some people are just fucking weird, and maybe weird people should be treated like they're weird. Okay, yeah, fair enough. But point being, when women are just weird, they can generally find people who sympathize with them, and maybe that's because we live in a society. We live in a society where women will be forgiven for their weirdness, even in the event that they're just weird. But men and indeed boys generally aren't. You can't even be a little bit weird or you'll be I don't know how to describe this without it sounding like victim mentality. But yeah, no, the society in which we live will forgive women for all manner of weirdness,
Yeah.
in all manner of socio-political directions. But
Our society, because of our gender attitudes, does a really, really lousy job of sorting out the difference between when weird is a good thing, when it's just not a problem, and when it's a red flag. Like that, because there are different types of weird, and unfortunately, we miss the red flags when those are present in females, and we often assign red flag status to it when it's harmless or beneficial if the weird person is male.
yeah, I'm saying weird as just to mean a little bit different, and people often misinterpret what I'm saying. Like when I say weird, they go, "No, you're not weird," because they think I'm saying weird as though it has negative connotations. It doesn't. Some people are just a bit weird, and that's, like I say, it's not a medical condition, and it's nothing. It's nothing particularly bad. Some people are just different. There's always going to be a minority of people who are just a bit different. People who just um, can't quite or don't quite go along with the consensus. And that's fine. That should have always been fine. And I don't say this in a fucking liberal progressive way. I say this in a sensible centrist way. Quite a lot of kids, and indeed adults, are just a bit different.
Yep.
And it's good that we accept women and girls who are just a bit different. But that excuse is not extended to men and boys who are just a bit different. They they are painted with some kind of black paint, no matter what kind of weirdness it is, no matter what kind of difference it is. Yeah,
You
no,
have
they can, we can all be weird, but it would be nice if general weirdness was accepted, in men and women alike, and in boys and girls alike. It's just that it's kind of not quite accepted when men and boys do it.
yeah. You have a lot of
Because
difference in or a lot of reasons in history to accept when men and boys are a little bit different. In fact, and it's I guess a good way to describe it is this, right? Well, you say you got a classroom full of kids, and they're talking about geometrical shapes in 3 dimensions, and the teacher brings in a cube, a box, right? And it's got a different color on every side, and so she can talk about the different aspects of this shape, based on like maybe the lines and colors and everything. But on the blue side, in the upper right hand corner of the square, from the perspective of the classroom, there's a little red dot, maybe paint splashed on it or something, and it's just there, and it's for most people they're not going to notice it, but you got one boy in the class that does, and it's a glaring mistake that there's this little red dot on the blue square, and that little red dot is not the point of the lesson in the classroom. So the teacher hasn't talked about it, hasn't highlighted it, hasn't said anything. Drives this kid nuts, and he finally has to raise his hand and say, "There's a little red dot right there on the blue square in the upper right hand corner from the classroom perspective." And there's different ways the teacher can respond to that. Wow, that's really great that you noticed. That's fine attention to detail. It's not the current subject of the lesson, but way to notice the finer details of the item that we're examining. Very observant, right? Good praise. and the interruption is not too long, and the class can go on and discuss other aspects of it. The kid's not going to be as bothered by it anymore because now everybody knows about it, and so on, right? But a lot of female teachers will turn around and snap at the boy. That's not what we're talking about. We're here to talk about the shape. We don't care about the red dot, right? And at that moment, the boy has now been castigated for being observant, right? Which is not a good thing, because the kid who notices the little red dot might be the kid that goes on in some engineering project to notice the flaw that is going to cause the building to come down the first time the wind speed gets above normal breeze level, or the first time there is a minor earthquake, or the first time the land around it thaws. And it's important to have that person who's maybe just a little bit weird, that notices what other people disregard because it's not the subject of the conversation. It's important to have that person, even if he lacks the ability to distinguish between when it's important to talk about the red dot and when it isn't. Because when it is, if he's the only person that notices it, and you've told him that he should never talk about the red dot, your building comes down and everyone inside of it is at risk of being crushed if they are unable to get out. Then, which, when a structure collapses, you don't really get a lot of time. So it's important that we notice the difference between when weird should be appreciated, when it should be condoned, or just enjoyed. Like, for instance, the guy who comes up with parody lyrics to popular music as his main response to popular music, calls himself weird even, right? There's no red flag in that. But there are people that would red flag that. Right? No noticing that there's a funny way to look at this. No noticing that there's a piece out of place. No noticing that the this one problem in the math book has the wrong answer given on the page where you're supposed to check your work. Like, no noticing, right? Yeah, and just as the Chud King pointed out, no noticing, right? So yeah, it's very important that we understand the distinction between appreciable, tolerable, and red flag behavior. But unfortunately, we put gender first and assign those concepts outside of their actual place. We'll go on a little bit more here. Some might say it's easy for women who can often face unwanted sexual advances and harassment to dismiss men's complaints about sexual rejection. So let's talk about the way she worded this. It's not just awkward, right? It is called poisoning the water. You are to view, based on the way she worded this, you're supposed to view all advances as harassment when these guys do it. Y'all know the meme, right? With the lady in the office, the secretary at the desk, and
that meme.
she gets, I don't have it handy, but she gets a compliment from the handsome guy, and she's all Twitter-pated, and then she gets the compliment from the unattractive guy.
He also had human resources.
Yep, threatens him with human resources, like that one. Yep, poisoning the well. You're supposed to see, from her perspective, you're supposed to see that as sexual harassment, being spoken to by a guy that is beneath her notice, in her opinion. We don't do well to recognize how painful this sexual invisibleness feels, Costello says. When men in particular are in that poor mental health, they externalize their aggression. But we find that incels have an awful lot of toxic self-image too. So they have a lot of hate toward themselves. Loneliness is a hell of a drug. And this is something that I think a lot of women do not understand, because nobody lets us experience loneliness. If they think we're lonely, they come looking for us, even if we're weird, even if we're the one that doesn't get it, dances the all the right moves to the wrong song, and so on, like that, or the right lyrics to the wrong song, wrong lyrics to the right song. We get invited to not be lonely. Most of us, if not by men, then by other women. You know what happens when men try to rescue other men from loneliness? Women bitch about it. Like this article.
And invade spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You probably can't find an incel space online that has not been invaded by women. Even if they take measures to make it a male-only space, there have been feminists who have pretended to be male incels and invaded those spaces and then come back and said nasty things about them.
And Bates was one of them.
Yep. And of course, if there's 10,000 posts on a forum, you could probably find a handful, the very worst examples on the forum, that would upset people. But are they representatives? Are those posts ambassadors for that forum, or would they be atypical? If you got 5 to 10 posts out of 10,000, would that be providing a good example, or would that be painting a picture based on your attitude, which is what I think she did?
Not many people post on the forums. It's just the same group of people posting, so you're not going to get a wide range of opinions.
I imagine you do. And just a little bit that I've interacted with people who are open on Twitter and Facebook and stuff about being incels. I see both sides of the political fence represented in terms of independence versus collectivism. I see social safety nets and so on being promoted by some and avoided by others. I see some people are religious and some are not. Some are atheist and some are not. Like, it's quite interesting. There seems to be, it goes across every part of the human spectrum of demographic types, honestly.
Some will just say the N-word and hate. Some will just say the N-word repeatedly, and some hate blacks.
Yeah. But a lot of incels are black. That's another one. Didn't you say, Richard, that incels are disproportionately black?
Yeah, and Asian, like Indian as well.
Yeah, and probably darker skinned Indians more than lighter skinned Indians. Yeah, and it seems like whether a civilization, a particular civilization, acknowledges having a caste system or not. Sorry guys, I'm going to get distracted a lot now. The damn thing is going off like every few seconds.
Yeah, I keep hearing it as well.
I'm just like, I'm really trying hard. I'm sorry.
I can if you want to want to head off now and change the batteries. I think I could.
Can't. If I change the batteries, the fire alarm will go off.
Oh shit!
I have to wait. I'm sorry.
But yeah, no.
I don't know I don't know what button to push in there, what series of, like, it's got some sort of thing. If I just take the battery out, it's bad. I don't want to deal with that again. Have you ever heard one of
We're
those?
almost finished.
It's like a car alarm. When it goes off,
Uh,
it's
Vic-
like one part of a car alarm. It's really high pitched, and you'll find
we
me.
almost finished the article.
Yeah.
We could do it. We could do it. We're 4 minutes
Yeah.
finished.
Yeah,
Keep
pretty
talking.
close. Oh no, we're not. We've got it's longer than it looks. Yeah. Where was I? Oh God, I see Andrew Tate mentioned again. Oh, I forgot about that. Okay, so we were, yeah.
Sorry.
So we'll skip whatever it was I was just talking about the CCE study, because I'm it's completely derailed. That noise is going to kill me. The CCE study also found that incels are likely to have extremely poor mental health. Many have depression and suicidal thoughts. Again, hello, loneliness. What does it do to you?
There it goes again.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
It's all good.
I will read the next 2 paragraphs here, and then we're gonna switch out for the patron show. And I'm gonna go cover that fucking thing with a hat,
No, but
so
yeah,
it won't be as loud.
Or I'll say the thing I was thinking of saying while you went off and changed this fucking tagline.
All right, I'm going to mute. I will unmute when I come back.
Okay. There is this irony, given what Richard just informed us of, that there are so many racial minorities disproportionately who find themselves as incels. And this isn't to demonize any of them, because I don't consider incel to be a demonizing term. I find it to be a made-up term that that feminists made up completely with no with no value as to who they might be applying this term to. But yeah, this is something that does affect, dare I say, immigrant men, because yeah, I know this has become a theme in the advancement of what is called all kinds of things with the word right attached to it. But yeah, it's people who feel isolated, and yeah, there's a lot of minorities who feel isolated, but men feel isolated. Anything you could say about migrants who feel isolated, the same thing could be said about native men, because they've been isolated in the same way, but by this same narrative of the general populace who are defined as the enemy, and the general populace defined as the enemy are men. And yes, that is especially straight white male cis men, but that includes straight cis men of anyone who's not male. And even as we flood this country with all manner of men who are all manner of boys who are not white, they are presented with the same narrative that because you are male and because you are straight and because you are cis, you should feel bad for who you are. And yeah, this doesn't discriminate between any given race. It applies to all of the men, all of the boys. It's not just the white boys. It's the black boys and the brown boys and the yellow boys. It applies to all of them, and so it's all ostensibly being offset in along the lines of, because you're not white, no, you have this fail-safe because you're not white. You have this, you have this out that, well, at least I'm not white, so I can still present myself as a victim. But this offers next to nothing in terms of a fail-safe. At the end of the day, you're still male, and no matter what color you are, if you're male, the schools in this country will teach you that because you're male, you should feel bad. You should feel like you are the oppressor, even though they're simultaneously teaching you that you should feel oppressed by straight white cis men. At the same time, you should feel like you are an oppressor. And yeah, this drags them in both directions. And in a way, that's even worse. Because, straight white cis males, straight Caucasian males are being told that you are every aspect of the bad thing. And so they have to think of themselves as villains. And but purely as villains, and so they have to figure that shit out. But the the racially diverse boys who go to these schools, they are told that they're bad people because they're males, but they're also good people because they're not white, and this drives them in two different directions. They're bad because they're males, but they're good because they're not white. And in a way, that's even worse, because they're like, well, what the fuck am I? Am I a villain or am I a victim? I guess I'm both. And, to think of yourself as a villain will ruin you psychologically. And to think of yourself as a victim will ruin you psychologically. And if anything, if you're a male who is not white, or not straight, or not cis, or whatever, you're going to be driven in both different directions. You're a villain and a victim at the same time, and if anything, that's going to fuck you up psychologically even more. Like, women are constantly being told that they're victims, and it kind of doesn't matter what their race is. Like, as long as you're a woman, you're a victim. And even if you're the whitest woman who ever existed, even if you're the whitest girl who ever existed, don't worry, you're a victim. You can focus on just being a victim. It doesn't matter what your race is. Don't worry. You can always fall back on the idea that you're a victim. And
in fact, if you don't, other women will get mad at you.
Yeah, but and it's like what Richard was saying, and it's like, if you can ever get an honest account from males of any of these client races, they will be like, they don't know how to describe this because they're being painted as villains and victims at the same time. And that's, it's hard enough for us straight white cis males to come to terms with being painted as victims, as villains in every possible dimension. And that's like, you can see why we would reject that. It's like, I'm not a villain in every way. I mean, surely there must be some aspect of my identity that's not a villain. And yet my school is telling me that I'm a villain in every possible direction. But any male of a racial client group or sexual orientation client group, gay men / boys are in the same situation as racial minority boys or men who are being told, in a way you're a victim, and in a way you're a villain. And that's double the psychological trauma. Like it's highly unhealthy to think of yourself as a victim, and it's highly unhealthy to think of yourself as a villain. And racial minority men and boys are being given both of those, having both of those psychological traumas inflicted on them, and racial minority girls are having both of those thrust upon them. They're having two layers of victimhood. Like, you're a victim because of your gender, and you're a victim because of your race, and that's gonna fuck you up even more. So this this whole victim villain mentality that is being thrust upon everyone, if anything, affects racial minorities even more. I mean, it affects girls and boys kind of equally.
It's all a con job that is used to exploit people. And if you are not exploitable based on the villainhood or victimhood that is imposed on you, if you don't adopt that mentality and allow yourself to be exploited as cannon fodder in the political war on individual rights and freedoms, then you become automatically the villain, and you're a bigger villain than any other villain, and suddenly you have to be canceled and eliminated. Especially if you do not lend yourself to the being used as victim fodder, on which the excuses for taking away certain groups' civil or human rights and freedoms is based, because that's the wedge that is being used by the puppet masters of woke ideology to take away everybody's rights and freedoms. So, for instance, if you're female and you are a recovered rape victim, and you do not support the idea that it's not a big deal that there are falsely accused men who spend 38 years in prison because rape victims have it worse, and so you say you're a due process rights advocate under that circumstance, you are a bigger threat than just any other recovered victim or any other independent person, any other due process rights advocate, because you buck the system of using the victimhood of female rape survivors as a wedge to pry loose the attachment that your country's citizens might have to their due process rights. And that's how that basically works.
I was sat here trying to think of what the opposite of a straight white cis male is, and I guess it's a lesbian transgender black woman. And I think, do they suffer the same? Do they suffer the equivalent problem of being a straight white cis male? And yes, they do, because they've been layered with 4 different kinds of victimhood. Like, it's bad to see yourself as a victim because of immutable characteristics, just like it's bad to see yourself as a villain because of immutable characteristics. Yeah, this is a system that nobody benefits from. Just like I was saying on Tuesday, that this fucking war in Iran is not benefiting anyone. It's just fucking everyone up. And yeah, this is if you divide everyone, no matter how many iterations of division you apply to this, if you think of yourself as 4 different kinds of victim, or 4 different kinds of villain, or equal parts villain and victim, like, none of it is good. It's all just gonna fuck you up psychologically. Like, no immutable characteristic makes you a villain or a victim. The only thing that should make you a villain or a victim is stuff that has happened to you. like the events that have happened in your life.
Well, how you respond to that event can also determine things like, that there are things that I've gone through that people have said to me when they've heard about it or learned about it. My gosh, I'm so sorry for you. And I've asked why, because like I got bit by a mosquito that grew in probably the sump pump in my parents' house in December of 1984. And or sorry, 1980. Yeah, it would have been 1984. I got sick. I got encephalitis, which is swelling of the. It wasn't swelling of the actual brain tissue. It was swelling of the lining around the brain, but they still called it encephalitis. And then it eventually did spread to the brain. I was in a short coma and everything from that, and it hurt like a son of a bitch. Like if you'd have approached me with a power drill and said, "Let me relieve some of that pain," I'd have been like, "Okay." And I was like 12 years old when that happened. And of course, I was talking about it last year. So, from 12 to 52. So 40 years later, right? And somebody was like, "Oh, that must have been horrible. I'm so sorry you went through that." And I'm like, "It was 40 years ago. It was an awful experience, but there are some things that I've learned since then. I read up on mosquitoes and read up on how to keep them out of your house and away from you when you're camping and stuff like that. It's made me a more cautious person, and I've figured things out that I have changed the way I respond to spiders and other creatures that eat mosquitoes. And it's if you take something like that, and all right, I survived this. I got a side benefit, by the way. I can get a migraine without feeling any pain at all. Unless I think about it, and then I'll notice it, and it does hurt. It's just not anywhere near as bad as encephalitis hurt. But I'll notice that when I get ocular migraines, so I'll notice it when I see the glowy donut in one eye and not the other. Um, and anybody that gets ocular migraines knows what I'm talking about. But It really depends. I don't consider myself a victim of that happening to me. Like at the time, I was a victim and my parents were victims. My brother was a victim because they all had to sit and worry. Most of the experience that I had with it was being unconscious, or being um, delirious, so that I really didn't know what was going on. I felt the pain enough to remember it and have a different attitude toward head pain than is normal. But my mom in particular, like, she didn't leave my side at the hospital. She stayed with me at the hospital, and when I was in a coma, I could hear her praying that God wouldn't take me away. And like that, I would consider her to have been a bigger victim of the situation than me, because the emotional roller coaster that she was on, every time I showed a little improvement and then dove right back down into super high fever that could be potentially deadly or take away my vision or my hearing and all that, I was a lot less aware of what was going on. And my dad had to continue working the whole time. He couldn't take time off work to be there because our bills wouldn't have gotten paid. And so he had to rely on my mom for information, but cell phones were not a thing for people in our income bracket back then. And they didn't call them that anyway. They were called car phones, because you didn't carry them around. You had them in your car. And so, yeah, and my little brother didn't really know what was going on, except that the adults were all scared. Right. And those levels of people don't think about stuff like that. I would much rather have gone through the experience I went through than what they went through, because of what I was going through. And it was a lot easier to be the one in the hospital bed than the one praying to God not to take away a family member. So victimhood is very much relative, and that was not intended as a pun. And because of that, when you have that mentality imposed on you, you have to feel bad about this. You have to feel helpless. You have to feel robbed, kept down, and trampled. And you're not allowed to experience what your brain goes through when you overcome something that is hard. When you have a success in spite of difficulties, pain and suffering, hurdles, and sabotage. When you succeed in spite of that, the changes that take place in your brain as a result of that are so beneficial. I can't even begin. It would take a whole show just to talk about that. But for people, shorthand on this, for people who play video games, you know what that feels like in small doses. Every time you hit a hard part of the game and you grind until you get it, until you beat it, until you get good, right? And I think everybody that is dedicated to something, music, dancing, math, any type of profession, inventing something, writing something, creating something, building something, you all know what that feels like. So it's a terrible disservice to people to impose victimhood on them and say you have to feel helpless, you have to feel bad, you have to never think you can overcome this, you have to never feel successful at overcoming this, because if you do, you're hurting other people who were victims. And that's what they do to minorities. That's what they do to victims of intimate partner and sexual violence. That's what they do to women in general. And it's evil. In some ways, it's as evil as killing people, because you're killing human spirits. I don't know if you guys can still hear the chirp. I will tell you this. I put a plastic cookie container over it because I put the hat over it and it did jack and shit. It did nothing. So this is just driving me nuts. But so I'll read the last paragraph I said I was going to read. Well, I haven't finished with this one. So he mentioned, or she mentioned, that incels are likely to have extremely poor mental health, and it's I would say some of that is imposed. Like, obviously, loneliness can do that, but the way that they are treated by other people outside of just not having the connection, not having the support group, people are mean to incels. It is a fact. Right. And they're mean to incels before and they ever go into a forum and start talking to other incels. Most of the
Even other
time.
incels are mean. Other incels are mean to other incels.
Yep. That is true. Incels are mean to each other. And we don't teach people to be kind anymore, or even just normally tolerant of people who are a little bit different. I think that the book, The Sneely Mouthed Nerds and the Wonder Octopus, should be republished and should be required reading at every school. That might get kids to understand a little bit about human contact with everyone instead of just your favorite people.
Health professionals are mean to incels.
Yeah. It's weird. Health professionals are mean to a lot of people. When I had encephalitis, they're not even always intentionally mean. This lady was trying to not scare the kid, and there is nothing more terrifying to a kid who's had emergency after emergency in their life and knows the drill than an adult who fakes normalcy to avoid scaring the kid. Like that person tells you that this is very serious and you might die. Well, the whole time they're trying to not tell you that. Like my mom and my grandma, grandma had been an ER nurse. They were just very matter of fact with everything. Okay, let's stand up and get in the car. They had to help me walk to the car. And neither one of them could pick me up because at 12 years old, I was taller than my mom and almost as tall as my grandma. And so they, between the two of them, they walked me to the car and helped me turn and pivot like I was disabled. And they did not, there wasn't a, now do this. Okay, now let's get you situated here. It was, okay, just turn this way, sit down. You'll feel better when we get this treated. Let's get your feet into the car, okay? And don't forget your seatbelt. None of this. There's a high-pitched, chirpy voice that these a lot of women do this, right? Oh my gosh, look at you. Aren't you so cute? What's your name? Like, I'm going to strangle you. And that's the way I felt about it. And it was I wasn't scared when I went into the hospital, but it took my mom and my grandma an hour to calm me down after interacting with that nurse. Like that, and she was not trying to be mean. She wasn't trying to scare me. Right? Now, the male version of this, I had injured one of my fingers. It was I had broken my oh no, that was when I had I was in the hospital with pericarditis when I was 8. That is an infection in the lining around the heart. We still don't know how I got that. And this male nurse made a big deal about getting the x-ray of my finger to make sure I could get that splint off. Like he was comforting a dying patient. And this is a mission. And that scared me too, because I'm like, why is this such a big deal? I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't like the splint, but it's just a splint. It's not like my friend that came to school for however many weeks with a cast on his leg and crutches. Like, that's uncomfortable. Right? And again, it's that there's just the fakey overdoing it, melodramatic adults that do that, and then healthcare, even when they're trying to be nice, right? But the minute you're an adult or you're old enough to go in there without a parent, or your parent isn't watching attentively, and you don't understand all their instructions because they've used a word that could mean 1,000 different things and you don't know which one they mean, or you have difficulty tolerating something like the temperature of the thing they are putting against your skin, or the position that they're asking you to sit in or hold yourself in so you can get that x-ray. Like, they start snapping at you. They start treating you like you're being wimpy. They tell you they can't help you. Right? I would say it's not just incels. Healthcare professionals are mean to autistic people. And since there's an overlap, like, it's really mean. But yeah, so they also score highly on a personality construct called the tendency for interpersonal victimhood, which results in a lack of empathy. Costello says, the way that manifests in victimhood orientation is no one cares about my pain. Why should I care about yours? So I will remind everybody what I said before about empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Right? Empathy is the ability to understand. I feel your pain, right? Empathy is literally, I feel your pain. When I say headache, everyone mentally can catalog headache because they've had one, right? Similar to stepped on a bee. If I say stepped on a bee, besides the fact that it makes you think of Amber Heard, you can mentally catalog that pain if you've ever stepped on a bee.
It's not just that you can't help. This is why I'm going to do I'm going to do a long-term video about fucking suicidal empathy, because it all depends on the idea that it flies in the face of the idea. Empathy is an involuntary reaction, right?
Right.
People who have empathy can't help feeling empathy for everyone, even the world's worst people.
So even professionals are using the word incorrectly.
Yeah.
Right?
If you
Because what
if you
he's talking about is sympathy. Why should I caring about? No one cares about my pain. Why should I care about yours? Right? Empathy is I feel your pain.
yeah, and
Sympathy is I'm so sorry you're in pain. Right?
yeah,
And
and both
compassion is let me see what I can do to help you get out of
and
that pain.
yes, I suppose compassion in that sense when it's tied to actions,
Right.
is voluntary, but when we speak of empathy, it's an involuntary thing, and this is why it pisses me off so much when people talk about suicidal empathy. If you have empathy for some demographics, but you don't have empathy for other demographics, that's not empathy. An empathic person, or sorry, an empathetic person, will feel empathy for any given person involuntarily, even criminals on death row. An empathic person can watch a child rapist on death row getting electrocuted to death, and they will feel empathy for that person because they can't help it. That's what empathy is. It's like I say, it's an involuntary reaction. That so to describe oikophobes as empathetic is completely missing the point.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about people who only give a shit about the feelings of certain demographics, and they give exactly zero shits about the feelings of other demographics. That is not empathy. That is the exact opposite of empathy. That is hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's only giving a shit about certain demographics and giving no shits about other demographics. If anything, that describes psychopathy. It's where you have this hierarchy in your brain of people who deserve compassion and people who do not. And I say compassion as something connected to the actions that you make in order to help those people. If you're only
empathy, by the way, empathy can go different directions. For instance, like your example, like of somebody watching a pedo be a molester because they don't arrest people for thoughts, they arrest people for actions. And a pedophile is just somebody who has impulses in that direction. As soon as you act on those impulses, an individual is no longer just a pedophile; they are now a molester or a rapist. And if somebody acts on those impulses and then kills the victim, they may get the death penalty in some states in the U.S. A person can watch that person be electrocuted and feel their pain mentally and care about it, right? And that's sympathy. But the way in which they care may be not compassionate. So some people might be happy that person is in pain because they want that person to be punished. That is sympathy, but it's anti-sympathy, right? Because you care, but the caring falls into the category of a sadistic caring as opposed to a compassionate caring. And
this is a mistake people often.
These are all terms. People don't understand words, and it does. I get pedantic about it when people use them incorrectly in a way that leaves room for error in hashing out concepts. And actually do like Costello, but that tells you professionals use these words incorrectly in ways that leave room for communication to be derailed in a way that creates openings for lack of compassion. Compassion can also be, I can't do anything about your pain, but maybe I can give you some other type of relief. Like, for instance, when my mom had her last surgery, they had a limit to how much pain medicine they can give a person, right, without causing damage and eventually killing the individual. And that my mom was at that point. She had her whole spine worked on. She had been walking crooked, like literally bent over to her left, and they straightened her spine. She had a lot done, and there's a degree to which there's going to be pain, and you're going to have to deal with pain. And so you can't shut that off, but you can distract. You can hold someone's hand. You can give them something else to think about, anything else. You can show love and be close, and let them see that you're suffering with them, and even expressing distress over someone else's experiences that are distressing is a form of compassion, right? That's all important, and it has less to do with empathy and more to do with valuing the individual and the individual's experiences. The big problem that we are seeing in this article, right? Now, Costello does show some valuing of incels and their experiences. The way that he talks, even in his quotes here, that the quotes that she picked, which are probably the ones that were the easiest for her to portray as a negative assessment of incels instead of a positive assessment. He shows compassion, and for instance, where she says some academic studies indicated that men who are deemed to be of what Costello calls low mate value are more likely to become hostile towards women. He didn't say that necessarily. She did. She cited studies, and consequently, women tend to not like misogynists, so you become lower mate value, then more misogynist, then lower mate value, then more misogynist. It's a cycle, which indicates that an individual gets trapped in a vicious social cycle that affects them mentally, where Costello would view this as something that could be dealt with in a way that would help the individual get back into the social fold. She might view this as something that would be a reason to treat the individual as a threat and further exclude them and possibly incarcerate them. Feminists treat it very differently than the people who are actually studying incels and trying to understand them. And here's where Costello says the same thing in a way, with the way that manifests in victimhood orientation is no one cares about my pain. Why should I care about yours? People reflect the way they are treated, and it creates a mentality. And as the previous paragraph shows, that mentality can push people away. It results in more treatment of the type that caused the mentality, and it exacerbates the mentality. And if you have someone who is autistic or has some other intellectual disability, who has been raised with social handicaps, they were raised in a man desert, they were raised in an environment where being a little bit different got them excluded. They were programmed growing up to respond this way. Their ability to break that cycle may be very limited, whereas the people around them who were raised in a more functional environment, maybe they weren't raised in a man desert, maybe they have a lot more examples in their life of being included and treated with at least baseline kindness and such. they have the capability of breaking that cycle. And if people choose to respond by engaging in further cruelty and isolationism as opposed to kindness and attempting to break that cycle by changing the way that they treat incels, then maybe that cycle could be broken and maybe reversed. But if it's continually imposed, if they continue to have to suffer cruelty and being excluded, being treated like a disease, like an infection in the population, it's only going to get worse. Right? So it's actually up to everyone out there listening. It's actually up to both men and women who recognize that human value isn't determined by how many people like you. It's shown, I suppose, how much other people recognize it by how many people like you, or how other people treat you. But the baseline of human value is you are worth as much as a human being. And that starts out that way with every human being. And it is, we're never going to solve this if we don't recognize that and change what we're doing. I'm going to call it into it here because it's 10 after 9. It's 12 after 9 now. So hopefully we can get that noise fixed in between now and the patron only after show. So I don't lose my train of thought every 30 seconds.
You should be able to find that What's Camp documentary online somewhere.
Definitely we'll do our best to. But in the meantime, thanks everybody for listening. Let's see. I got all of the super chows. I don't think there are any super chats. Let's double check. I know there were not any paid Rumble rants, so, and I don't see any super chats going all the way back to the beginning. So that will be it. Thanks everybody for listening. And thanks to all my co-hosts for going over this weird article with me. And thanks again to Brian for going late again. Night all.
See you next Thursday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.